right, Genesis chapter 11. This is one of my favorite readings to go through. And I don't think I've ever taught on it here at the gathering in 15 years. I love reading it, but it's difficult and hard to understand, but I want to break it down. So Genesis chapter 11, I'm going to have you guys read. We're going to go break it down verse by verse. So if you don't open up, I'm going to have you read it. Yeah, so somebody, I need verses 1 through 9.
More?
Maybe. Is there more in the back? All right. Mr. Aaron is grabbing us some stuff. Great. Somebody read for us Genesis verses 1 through 9. The whole thing. 11, 1 through 9. Yes, please. You got us? Really loud. Make sure everybody can hear you, though.
Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down." And there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. Excellent.
Now, as I read through this many years ago, I always struggled to understand, like, what is the meaning of this? And I read through it a few times and over the years, and it was kind of like this idea of, like, okay, people are wanting to become like God. They wanted to build something in the heavens. They thought they could become like God. Okay, easy story. And so what's the big deal about this? And I question, is this really what this is all about? Is this just one story? And so as I continue to read through the scriptures for several years and reading the Torah portions and reading through the Bible, I started realizing that there's other connections that are involved in this, and there are some things that don't make sense. Like in the very first passage, you said, verse 1, it said what? That they were all one people and all had one language? In the same words, right? And if you just read the chapter before, you read the biography of Noah's children and his 3 sons. And if you read through that passage, you recognize that it says that each one of their children had these beget, and they all had their own languages. Each one of them had their own languages. So out of all these kids, they all had their own languages, and all of a sudden you get to chapter 11, it says they all had one language. So that doesn't make sense. How can they all have their own language and yet have one language? So there's all of these things, and one of the things that I'm not going to get into tonight, but there's these Hebrew words that we break down and we talk about, and the language parts are 2 different Hebrew words, right? And so there's these ideas, there's these things that we have to look at, and we have to understand that this isn't just a history book. It's not just telling us the history of the begets, and then this person, and had this person, and then there was a kingdom, and there was all this stuff. These stories all have a point. Even the begets have a point. You know what the begets are? So-and-so beget, so-and-so. Okay, you guys, just making sure you're with me. All right, even the begets have a point. They are extremely important. And to understand this, we have to back up a little bit and see what happened with some of the begets. And so if you have your Bible, if you go to Genesis chapter 10, somebody read verses 1 and 2 for me. 1 and 2. You got us? No.
Genesis
10, 1 and 2. Come on, Nora. Shout it out, girl.
This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. The sons of Japheth: Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tyre.
Good. Excellent. Now, who wants to read 8 through 10? We'll skip down a little bit, verses 8 through 10.
I got it.
Go.
Cush fathered Nimrod, who was the first on earth to be a mighty man. Wait, 8 through 10.
8 through 10. Mm-hmm.
He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of the kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land, 8 through 10, sorry. Yeah, got it. Cool.
Excellent. All right. So in this passage, I always remembered Nimrod being like this cool guy, like Nimrod, the first on earth to be a mighty man. Like, I remember seeing a high school somewhere in the southeast, I think, southwest somewhere, that the name of the high school was Nimrod, right? I mean, it was like the mighty hunters. Like, it's this cool name, like the pirates, of Trist, or, no, that's not scary. Like the, you have this idea, like Nimrod is the hunters, these mighty hunters, and you have this idea of, like, he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. It's kind of this cool thing, right? And I always looked at that for years. It's like, okay, this is a good thing. Maybe I should find a way to teach on this. And I always struggled getting a sermon out of this. Like I said, I've never taught on these passages before until today. But as I researched this on this passage alone, I don't have it up here for you, but actually I think I do. Yeah, okay. So the 4 words there in Hebrew after Cush is just these 4 words: Nimrod, Halal, Hayah, and Gabor. Right? And so one of the things you've probably heard me say a lot over the years is that every name in the Bible, including your own name in Hebrew thinking, has meaning. Right? The name that you have actually defines who you will be or who you are. Right? And in Hebrew, you would name children with the idea, like, I'm going to name a child because they are going to be this. Right? My name is Netanyahu, right? And I don't think my parents knew this, but it means a blessing from God, right? A blessing to God. And so every name, Aaron has a very Hebrew name as well. Do you remember what your name is?
Mud.
No, it's not Mud.
Bud.
Oh, Bud. You said Mud. Bud? A flowering bud?
The staff with Moses, something like that? No?
I don't remember.
You're the teacher.
I didn't look up your name, though. I looked up Nimrod's name, right? So Nimrod, his name is very specific. His name means, he said, get down. That's what his name means. Get down. Below me. I'm above you. Right? That's what his name means. Nimrod means get down. Right? And then halal is this idea. What did it say in verse 8 again? Let's go back. Let's read 8. 8 says, Nimrod, he was first on earth, the first on earth, halal is the word, to be mighty man, right? And so the word there for the first is halal. It means to began. It means profane, pollute, defile, to break away with, to break away from tradition, which is interesting, because what tradition would Nimrod be breaking away from? What tradition would he be polluting or defiling? Let's ask a question. Let's not forget the begats. Who is Nimrod's great-grandfather? Noah. Noah was his great-grandfather. Noah was the one who probably taught his children what? Who saved them? Who gave them a purpose and a path? This is how I want you to live. Who said, this is what you are to do? Nimrod is one of the first to begin polluting or break away from the tradition that this is the God whom we follow. This is the beginning of a new revolutionary way to live. This is the beginning of something, big and new, and we are going to revolutionize the way we live here on earth. Not like the old ways, not like the traditional ways, not like those people that are in the past. This is something new. We are going to do something new here. Hayah, to become or becoming. He's creating something new. And then Gabar, mighty, powerful. It means tyrant, authoritarian, dictator is what this word means. So Genesis 9, do I not have Genesis 9 on here? Genesis 9 says that he was mighty hunter before the Lord. Genesis 8, Cush fathered Nimrod. Nimrod, Halal, Hayah, right, Gabor, right? The mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And then it says, therefore it said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The question is, What is Nimrod hunting? What does it mean that he's a mighty hunter? I mean, there was plenty of hunters, I'm sure. Were they hunting for food? Is that what the illusion is? Or was he hunting for something else? What could he be hunting for? Power, good. What else?
I have a note in my Bible.
Uh-oh, what does it say?
It says actually the word before means it should be against.
Ah, yes. He was hunting against the Lord, right? Not necessarily hunting for power, but maybe hunting for people. Remember, he's creating something new. He's trying to move people away from tradition, away from God. He is not a mighty hunter for God. He is a mighty hunter against God. He is doing everything he can to manipulate people away from this tradition, away from this God, and from all of the things that their grandfathers had taught them. The idea that he was a mighty hunter is more of the idea that he was a master manipulator. He knew how to appeal to people's natural desires for something greater. It's a desire that each and every one of us in humanity have, this desire for something big, to be a part of something greater than ourselves. And there are many people in history who have taken advantage of that, manipulated thousands of people because of that. Nimrod was giving people a cause to be a part of, to pursue, something to motivate them to greatness. From a biblical perspective, we know that we can use this as well. God gives us this idea that we can be motivated by something that he gives us to do. But like every sword, there's an opposite edge. There's a dangerous part of this, right? Which is probably why Yeshua said this, right? You can only serve one master. And as I looked this up, this was interesting too. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money, some translations say. You might have a different translation, but the Greek word there is mammon. When I looked that up in the Hebrew, it means what is trusted in. You can't have two things that you're trusting in. You can only trust in one thing. You will either hate and despise the other, or you will not be devoted to one. Which is fascinating as I continue the story. What are the people in this kingdom that Nimrod has created, the kingdom of Shinar, which is what it's called? What are they trusting in? If he's moving them away from the traditions of following God, if he's moving them away from the beliefs and the faith of God, if he's moving them away from all these things that they've been taught to trust in, what is he teaching them to trust and believe in? So let's go back to chapter 11, verse 1. Right? And here's where I found something that was interesting. Some of you have heard me use this language before. I believe that I found a chiasm. I couldn't find any rabbis to point this out, so I was putting it together myself, and when I found it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, right? So bear with me, because this is the chiasm that I found. I thought it was fascinating. A chiasm basically is when you have these verses that go in parallel with each other that are either saying the same things or opposite things, and they usually line up and they have a middle point, very similar to Genesis and some of the other passages that we've taught before. And as I was going through this, I was like, wait a second. The first four verses are saying the exact same thing as the last four verses, just differently. In verse 1, what do we read? Somebody read verse 1. Go. Oh, you don't have it.
Oh, hold on. I got it right here.
Mm-hmm. Somebody be ready for verse 2.
Chapter 11, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now the whole earth had one language and the same words.
And the same words. Interesting. Who has a different translation?
I do.
No, not you. Somebody else. Abby, what do you have?
I have the same.
Anybody else have a different translation? Good. Go, Bobby.
Which verse?
1.
Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words.
And the same. That was what he said. Different translation.
One different word.
What was the last word that you had? Words, and yours was what? Language?
Mine was words.
Yours was words too. That's what I mean. What was the last one? Who has the last word as different?
Me.
Go.
Now the whole world had one language and a common speech.
Common speech. Okay, interesting. So the word here for speech is debar, right? Language. The whole world had one language, which we knew they didn't all have, right? There was a common language, but in the other passages in chapter 10, it had like dialects when it was talking about they had, all of the sons had different dialects. So if you know that you're from St. Bernard Parish, you're not from who's from St. Bernard Parish? St. Bernard Parish, one of the first things that you said was, to me, like, you're not from around here, are you? How could you tell that I wasn't from around here?
Voice.
Right? I had a different dialect, right? There was something, the words that I used were funny, right? And so in chapter 10, you had all of these families, but they had all these dialects, but they all spoke a common language, which was Hebrew. But the last word in there is an interesting word because it uses the word debar, which doesn't actually mean words or speech, right? It's a tough word for people to translate. Debar is the idea, it means word. It can translate word, but it also translates to matter or thing. Or the idea of like they all had one common language that they spoke, but they also had something in common. They had this idea, this common possession in common. They had this matter in common. There was something about them that brought them together, not just speech, right? Because it's not saying they had the same language, right? They had the same words, but there was something else that brought these people together. Verse 2. Be ready. Who said ready? Go. Verse 2.
As people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there.
Awesome. Okay, so here's another thing. They migrated. What does migrated mean? They all come together, right? They come from different places and they come to one place. But it's interesting. It says they all migrated and they came from where?
The east.
They came from the east. Why would it say they came from the, I mean, there's no like geographical markers really at this point, so we don't necessarily know where they're coming from. And what we realize, what I found and as I studied this, is that coming from the east isn't necessarily a geographical phrase, it's an idiom. It's an idiomatic phrase, right? When we think of what comes from the east, every morning, what comes from the east? The sun, right? And so if you move away from the sun, the idiomatic idea is that the sun is from the east. There's light, there's goodness, there's truth in the east, right? And when I move away from that place, I move to where? Not the east or the west. When I move away from truth and goodness and light, where do I move to? Darkness. I move away from truth. I move away from these things. The east, that's funny, yeah. You said the east. You what?
Like, that's just where my mind went.
Yeah, no, that's good, that's perfect, Because for years, that's where my mind went, right? I mean, they moved from the east, what's the big deal, right? Until you recognize that this is an idiom, right? The idea that it's the east where you find light and goodness and truth. And the Bible is telling us from an expression, right? Metaphoric, idiomatic expression. It was raining cats and dogs. It's not literally raining cats and dogs. It was raining heavy. They were moving from the east. They were moving away from truth. They were moving away from the light. They were moving to a place of darkness. They were moving away from the source of all godliness. And where did they dwell? Where did it say they dwelt? Shinar. Whose kingdom is Shinar? Nimrod. These people moved away from the source of truth and godliness, and they moved to the darkness and to another ruler. And what does this ruler's name mean? What does his name mean? He said, get down. They moved from the place of light and goodness, who, when we think of God above us, to a place of darkness, to a place who rules over us, who says, get down. Right? And they dwelt there. Verse 3. Come on, verse 3.
I told you I wasn't going to read for you anymore. She made fun of me.
It's because of your dialect. Now you're part of the story. It's part of the story now. It's perfect. Fits right in.
3, right? Okay. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and something for mortar.
And something for mortar. What was the something for mortar?
I don't know. How you pronounce that?
What?
Bit.
Oh, it's got a weird word there.
Mine says tar.
Tar?
Yeah.
Good. Yours says tars, yours says bitumen or some weird word? Yes, that's okay. Verse 4. Scattered up. So here's verse 3, right? So interesting thing. Read it again for us really loud. Really loud.
And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And
Okay, stop right there. Come, let us make bricks. Who wants to do that? How exciting is that to say, hey, come on, I got a great idea. Let's go make bricks. Right? That sounds like a great thing to do. I mean, who thinks like, that's fantastic? Nobody thinks that. What's the very next verse? Verse 4.
Verse 4?
Yeah, verse 4. Read verse 4.
Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its tops in the heavens."
Perfect. Stop there. So then they said, come, let's build a city, right? Where the bricks and everything that we have are in the tops, where we can be in the heavens. Which one sounds like it should come first? The second one. Why?
Because it just sounds better.
Hey, let's make bricks. And maybe with these bricks we can maybe we can see the heavens, you know. That's boring, right? I don't want to make bricks. But if somebody says, hey, let's build something together. Let's build this thing that we can get to the heavens and we can see into the heavens and all these things. And by the way, I got bricks. What do you think? Right? Which one are you going to do, right? So you're looking at these passages, it's almost like they're out of order. Like, why would the Bible tell us this, right? That's not a very motivating thing, except for the fact that the writers of the Bible are purposely putting this out of order because the emphasis isn't on the city. The emphasis is on what? The bricks. The emphasis of the writers are pointing to the bricks. There's something about these bricks. What do we know about bricks? What are bricks? What do we think about when we think about bricks? Egypt. Great. What do we think about when you look at the bricks? What do they have in common? In Egypt, as you think about the bricks and you think about them, what do they? No, what do the bricks themselves have in common? What? What?
Uniformity.
They all look the same. The bricks are identical, right? You build bricks on your houses, you know, I mean, if you wouldn't put red brick and tan brick and, white brick, as you're building a house today, would you? All right, you would put all red bricks together, you'd put all white bricks together, you'd put all tan bricks together. Nobody puts, opposite bricks together. Always, from a biblical perspective in ancient history, right, bricks were identical. That was the thing about them. You looked at a brick and it was identical. As well as in that passage it talked about the stones, right? We have bricks for stones. When you think of stones, what do we think of? When you look at a stone, what is common about other stones? What?
They're different.
They are different. It's very hard, almost if impossible, to find one stone that's identical to another stone. Which is another way to look at what other things in creation are like that. What? People. Right? You can say it out loud.
Well, no, I was talking because I knew, but I didn't want to say
Bob the Builder didn't want to say anything. Right? Here's one fact that I learned just recently, too. This is fascinating. Humans, we talk about uniqueness all the time here. We talk about identity all the time here. But there's one thing in all of creation and all of humanity that we all have in common, and it's this one thing that separates us from all other humans, even identical twins. Identical twins have the same DNA, but there's this one thing in each twin that the other twin does not have. What is it?
Fingerprints.
Fingerprints. Every human being has a unique fingerprint, and when we talk about the finger of God being touched by the finger of God, each and every one of us was created in the image of God. You were created uniquely and different from every other person in this room, and you can prove it by just putting your finger up. You are different. You are unique. So here's this idea that these people are moving away from the east. They're moving away from truth. They're moving away to a place that says, get down. They're moving to a place where they say, no, there's no, uniqueness out of any of you. We're going to make bricks. You're all going to be bricks. We're all going to be in this place together, and we're going to make bricks. And then it says, what's the last two words in that passage? Verse 3. The materials that they used.
They had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar.
Bitumen. I think that's the right word. I've read that word in a translation before. It's a really hard translation. Don't feel bad. Right? The Hebrew words there are chemar, haya, chomar. Right? There's a similarity in those words, and I don't have it up here. But it's in those idea, chemar and chomar. Chemar is this untranslatable word. It's only used in 3 other passages. One of the 3 is right after this passage in the very next verse. Right? So translators have a tough time trying to figure out what this word means. The best they can come up with it is this idea that it's something that rises to the surface. Right? It's material, that it's something is made from. It's like the components of something. It's the idea that stuff that in some rabbis I've heard, it's the stuff that makes up human beings. What makes up a human being? What makes a human being a human being? Right? I mean, we have skin, and we have muscles, and we have organs, right? We have thoughts. We have these things that make us up, that we can see, that we do, right? They had desires. Human beings have these desires. It's the idea, maybe it's their energy, the efforts, or maybe even just your whole body is this idea of chemar. As one rabbi that I studied he said that this is the difference between the spiritual and the material human being. What's the difference between those two? What's the difference between the material human being and the spiritual human being? You can see the material, right? You can touch, you can feel it, you can hear it. I can put my eyes on it, right? That's the material human being. But I can't do any of those things to the spiritual. The spiritual is the soul within you, right? It's who you are that gives you that compass between right and wrong. It's who you are that says, I shouldn't do that. It's who you are that says, this is true, this is right, this is love. That's the spiritual in every single human being. This is the idea of chemar. And then it says haya homar, right, which is the clay, the mortar, the things that bonds you together. They had what they needed. They had the material person. And because they had this, they could make you into clay. They could cement you together. They could, in other words, enslave people because they had the material person. That's what they had. And so, because Nimrod had all these things, it was easy to have control over everybody. Once all of you are bricks, once you're all the same, then you will all do what I tell you. Because my name means what? Get down. Verse 4. Somebody read verse 4? Not all at once here. Abby.
And they said,
Yes.
Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth.
Excellent. How is this possible? How is that possible to get somebody to do that, Abby? How can you get somebody to do that? Read that again. Come, let us
build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth.
Right.
Who doesn't want to be great?
Who doesn't want to be great? And once you have sucked out the soul, the spiritual, and all you have is the material, and all you have, imagine yourself, if some of you can remember this point in life where God was not a part of your life, where you were empty, and you were searching for something to make you happy. You were searching for something to give you meaning in life. You were searching for fulfillment. You didn't, this God that people talked about, whatever, I don't want to hear about God, right? There's this idea that there are these Christians, I want to tell you about Jesus and all this stuff. You're like, come on, I don't believe any of that stuff. I remember those days. But I also remember those days where I was empty inside. And I was longing for something to fulfill me, longing for something to bring me joy. And I searched in place, I searched in girls, I searched in drugs, I searched in these places that I wanted to find happiness and joy and fulfillment. And what did they always bring me? What? Emptiness. Continual void. And if there's somebody that's saying that, hey, I can fill that void. I can give you this purpose. I can give you this fulfillment in life. Come, follow me. Remember, Nimrod is a mighty hunter. What is he doing? Once he's stripped you of anything spiritual and you are all just material beings, now I can give you a purpose and I can give you a vision that's mine. And I can manipulate you to do what I want. This is what Nimrod did. And it's not that hard. We can still see it today. I mean, imagine if there was people saying like, look, I have this grand plan. I promise you, if you follow me, we can end all human trafficking. We can get rid of all sex trade. If you just come and follow me, I can do this. Or maybe it's this idea of like world hunger. We can take care of world hunger. Let's just, all of us come together, follow the instructions that I give you, and we can take care of all of world hunger. Or maybe there's a pandemic, and it says, we can take care of a pandemic, and we can make sure, wipe it out worldwide. Just follow the things that I ask you to do, and we can wipe this out. And what happens is these leaders always, over and over and over, they promise certain things. They give you this grand vision of what you can achieve, while slowly taking away little bits of freedom. Because to achieve this, you have to give this up. And to get more of this, you have to give that up. And to do this and to accomplish these things and to achieve this great thing, we have to give this up. Don't you want what we're trying to achieve? I mean, do you really need this? We can achieve this if we just give this up and move in this direction. Until there is no God and there is no freedom. You cannot serve two masters. Mammon. Verse 6. Justice. Verse 6. 11:6. Got him. Verse 6. 11:6.
The Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do.
Yep.
And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible to them.
Nothing that they propose to do will be impossible. They all had one language. Where have we heard that? Verse 1. They all had one language. And halal was the same word in verse 1, right? Well, halal was the idea of polluting, moving away from. Verse 1 lines up with verse 6, saying the same thing in the opposite direction, though. Verse 7, Roman.
Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they may not understand one another's speech.
Come, let us go down, right? The same word that we find in verse 7 is actually in verse 3, and this is where it kind of gets backwards a little bit. But Yahab is the idea of come, let us go down. The idea that in verse 2 is come, Yahab, let us make bricks. Nimrod says, come on, let's all come together. You're going to do something. You're coming to me. Where in this passage, God says, no, come, let us go down to them. It's the opposite. One is about enslaving people. The other one is about rescuing people. Verse 8, Aaron.
So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city.
Verse 2 is about coming together. It was about bringing these people together, coming from the east. And instead of coming together, migrating, God is saying, no, we're going to scatter them. It's the opposite. We're moving them away. What was the thing that, if we remember, when God was telling Adam, what did he say? Go and multiply and fill the earth, right? Scatter throughout the earth. Nimrod is the opposite idea of God. Nimrod is saying, no, let's all come together in one place. God is continually saying, go out and fill the earth. Verse 9. Shauna.
Therefore its name was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth.
Come, let's make a name for ourselves. God says, yeah, we'll make a name for you. We'll make you a name that nobody will ever forget. From now on, this place will be called Babel. You wanted to make a name for yourself? I'll give it to you. But it's not going to be what you wanted. You wanted to be known as God, and from now on, you'll be known as Babel, a name that will always be remembered. Verse 5. AB, you got 5?
Verse
11, verse 5.
Okay. God came down to look over the city and the tower those people had built.
Very good. This is the center point. God comes down. He descends to these people. In contrast to the one whose name means what? Get down. He's telling people, my name means you all get down. I'm above you, you get down. And the one who is above does what? He comes down. He comes down to be with his people. This is a contrast between the two ideas. God rather comes down not for himself, he comes down for the people. This is the idea that we've talked about for a long time, the difference between de jure leadership. Bobby, you remember this? De jure leadership and de facto leadership. What's de jure leadership? Do you remember?
De facto is leader of the day. De jure is leader you pick.
Reverse. Close. De jure leadership is the idea that you have a title, you have power, you have control because you have this title, that you have a name badge that's on you. You're going to wear it on a regular basis. You guys both have power given to you by a sheriff. You have de jure leadership. But de facto leadership is the opposite. It's one who doesn't necessarily have a title, but people look to him or her as the leader. There's something about them, there's something about you that I want to follow you. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to know what your idea is because that's what I want to follow. And it's not because you have a title. We could be peers. But de facto leadership is this idea that I know I can trust you, therefore I'm going to follow you. I know that you have my best interests at heart. I know that you actually care about me. I know that the decision that you make and the choices that you're going to, suggest to all of us isn't self-motivated. It's not about you. It's about you caring about all of us. And so I trust you. So I'm going to follow you. This is the idea of de facto leadership. And these are the two different contrast between these two ideas and these two people, between Nimrod and God, and this idea of this authoritarian and this idea of this tradition of following God. The tyrant who always wants power, who always wants control, as opposed to God who is always saying, no, you go. You can do this. I trust you. I'll partner with you. Go do this. Go, scatter. I'll be with you, but go ahead, leave. The ultimate leader who demonstrates his concern to rescue us, even when we got our own selves into this mistake. God says, come on, let's go down there and let's rescue them. This story is interesting because the very next story after a whole bunch of begets is the story in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. I think I have it right here. Somebody read that. Read.
Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing.
God says to Abram, go. Go yourself. You go. You leave this land, away from this place, away from this family, away from this tribe. You go. And who will make your name great? God will make your name great. Nimrod said, let's make our name great. I'm going to make my name great. You get down to me. And God says, no. Let us rescue these people. And hey, Abram, you go. You leave this place. You go. Scatter. And I will be the one to make you and your name great. What the rabbis point out about this is that it wasn't just this random idea, like let's find a guy and tell him to scatter and get out of here. Right? The rabbis point out that this Abram guy wasn't just randomly chosen by God, but that it was years before this moment that Abraham actually chose God. They point out in the mathematics of, if you go through all the begets, it was at age 48 that Abraham made this decision. Abram made this decision to turn away from this idea of bricks and the city, because remember, he's in the land of Ur, the Shinar area. He's a part of this. In fact, other rabbis point to the fact that he was probably in line of royalty. He might have been one of the princes in this area. And at 48, the rabbis point out and they say, look, the reason he turned away, the reason he recognized that there had to be something else, because he met Nimrod. He knew evil face to face. He was confronted by it, and he made the choice, this is not good. He made the choice, other rabbis say, to flee that. I have to get out of here. There's something that is a part of this that is not right. In fact, in the two girls that Sarai and his brother's wife, Milcah, right, both of those names mean princess or queen. Another idea that maybe this was royalty. Maybe they were a part of this. Maybe they were so entrenched in this idea of this government, of this tyranny, that there was something a part of this that they recognized, this is evil. This is wrong. We have to leave this. And years later, at the age of, I think, 70 or 75, whatever it says here, God says, all right, you've made the choice. Now go. I'm choosing you to go out of this place. And he leads him on a path to make Abraham's name great. Abraham is typically known as the man of faith. All of Judaism points him to the father of Judaism as the father of faith. In Christianity, we point to him, Paul points to him as the father of faith, right? This idea of what faith is. Abraham, in the Hebrew language, the word for faith, do you remember what the word for faith is in Hebrew? Do you remember? This is important. Write this down. The word is emunah. I don't think I have it up here. Emunah is the word for faith. But it's not a noun, it's a verb. Emunah doesn't mean faith, it means faithfulness. Emunah means fidelity. Emunah means loyalty. It means steadfast. It means trusting. It's the idea of not walking away when times are tough, but you stay strong. You are emunah. You are faithful. Nimrod was able to manipulate others to have faith in him, to move away from trust, to move away from faith, fidelity, and trust in God, to walk away from the traditions of all of their fathers, to walk away from all the things that their grandfathers had told them, and began this new thing. And Abraham was the man of emunah. He chose to trust. He chose to act on this call. He chose to move, to live a life of faith, to demonstrate the duality of how the spirit and the material are one. They're not to be separated. They're not to be stripped away. Faith is the idea of putting those together and moving with God. They are one. That each and every one of us in this room and every human is unique. You are not the same. You are not to be bricks. You're stone. You're creative. You're unique. You're a special human being that is extraordinary and not identical. Faith is not just about believing in God and following His plan. It's about knowing who you are and believing that and acting upon those gifts. It's your job to use them, to trust that He put those there for a reason. And when you do this in loyalty and trust in Him, then we too are called emunah. When we act upon these things, we are called faithful. When we act upon the call, we are faithful. When we do and use the gifts that He's given you, you too are called faithful. So may this hopefully shed light on a new idea of what Babel is all about. It's the idea of freedom. It's It's the idea of uniqueness that we have to be aware of, because in every society, Nimrod didn't just exist once. He has existed in many generations. And he will continue to exist in many more generations. And the reason this story is in here is a warning. Beware of those Nimrods. Beware of those who wish to make all of you bricks, who wish to control you and take away the freedom that God has given each and every one of you. That's all I have. I'm going to end with, let me end with this. Let me ask with questions. I talked a lot. I didn't get a lot from you guys. So if you got questions, let's end on that. And then Aaron, you're next week if you want to give a question for next week. Do you have any questions for Nimrod? There was a lot of Hebrew in here that I did not cover because I was like, this is way too much.
Was it the Hebrew, is it Sapha or Sapha? Sapha?
In which verse?
The one that meant language. I was just glancing over at Blue Letter Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes through like language, speech, but it also goes into like land area, but then it even goes as far as saying like binding and side. And so I was wondering, could it be taken further? And I was just kind of like reading it in this way, the whole in English, but just placing it less about one characteristic and more about like the culture and everything. Like it entails everything about these people, moving from their mindset, moving from who they are, moving from their language, but also their culture and what they believe, like, and also their it entails everything moving into this new way.
It could be. Safar is the word in Genesis 10, correct? Right. So in 11:1, the words there are Lashon Dabar. Right. Lashon is a different word for Safar is the idea of I think it's tongue, or no, it's lips, right? And Lashon is tongue, right? So it's this idea that they spoke the same language in 11:1. They have the same tongue, the same like English or German or French is you would talk about that as being the tongue. Okay. So they had the same tongue, which would have been probably Hebrew. That's what the ancient people have said all along, right? It was Hebrew. But in Safar, it was different. It could be dialect, but it could be what you were saying as well, all of these other things that bound them together, correct? And they moved, a bunch of people moved from the east, they moved away from that. So that would all fall in line with they moved away from the traditions, they moved away from, think about traditions, family traditions. Your great-grandfather, right, started all of these traditions that all these people now live this way, and now you're moving away from that. So yeah, that could be. Good question. Thoughts, questions? Aaron, you ready for next week?
Good there.
Is there a point of focus that we should be reading and stay focused on?
Yeah, so I know we're calling this Torah portions, and I read through my sections a few times, and I think I want to, as a group, look at Luke 23. It's one of the passages that accounts for Christ crucifixion, and the theme of the week is selfless. It's probably the best story we can look at, but read it a few times. There's some small little things I want to look at and glean from it. I guess my question would be, what do you notice in there that you've never noticed before? So if you read it 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times, you'll notice something probably that you haven't.
All right, good. So make sure you read Luke 23. Get the rest of the Torah portions if you can. Write down some questions, especially from Luke 23. That's the idea. That's the emphasis point, Luke 23. So write down your questions on Luke 23. Or if you see something that Luke 23 connects to in Genesis or 1 Samuel, write those questions down. Bring them to this group so that when you come here, you can say, hey, I got a question. Did you see this? And like you were just saying, there's a bunch of stuff that I researched that I can't put in the sermon. right? There's just too much. But it might be something that connects. You might want to have an answer to that. So bring that question so we can discuss these things.